Bon dia, people. Things are getting crazy. My family's drama is pretty much maxed out right now because of these ancestry tests. More of my friends' families are getting surprises. I just ordered 6 more kits to shake things up some more. I have a problem. I know. Today's story might just be the craziest one so far. My original intentions by handing out these kits was to have these people come onto my channel and read out their results, but the majority of them are revealing dark secrets from the past. Today's story is about my boy John. See, I gave my boy John a kit a while back and his results came back pretty normal, a bunch of countries and percentages. But after he saw one of my previous videos, he took a second look and noticed that there was something off. Just to give you background information, John's mother has a half-brother, Ned, who has 2 kids. We'll call them Arya and Sansa. So based off this lineage, Arya and Sansa are half first cousins to John, while Ned is a half uncle. In other words, Arya and Sansa should be listed as second cousins on John's Ancestry app, sharing somewhere around 450 centimorgan. However, they were listed as first cousins, sharing closer to 980 centimorgan.
That's weird.
This was extremely odd because I've read that you will absolutely, positively share DNA with parents, children, siblings, half-siblings, all the way down to second cousin. But for any relationships further than a second cousin, there are increased chances that you do not share any centimorgans with them at all. But John's scenario doesn't fall under these circumstances because it's actually quite the opposite. He is so closely related to Arya and Sansa that we can deduce that these indicators are more accurate than not. However, at this point, I've reassured John that even though a centimorgans chart gives you an upper and lower range for a family member, there are some rare cases where a family member will fall just outside of that expected range. Even though these are very extremely rare and there isn't much evidence backing it up, I've read that there are some cases where it happened. Take this chart for example. It shows the average amount of centimorgans you share with a half-first cousin is 457, with a lower limit of 137 and an upper limit of 856. So with Arya and Sansa having 980 centimorgans shared with John, they really aren't too far out of range for a half-first cousin. It's extremely improbable, but still possible. However, looking at the same centimorgans chart, it shows the average amount of centimorgans you share with a first cousin is 874, with a lower limit of 553 and an upper limit of 1,225. So based on probability, this is most likely the more accurate relationship. So I had to introduce the possibility that there was a pedigree collapse more recently than not. In genealogy, pedigree collapse describes how reproduction between 2 individuals who knowingly or unknowingly share an ancestor caused the family tree to be smaller than it would otherwise be. Your pedigree starts with you at the point of an inverted triangle that fans out, doubling the number of ancestors at each generation. At some point in everyone's pedigree, instead of different individuals filling out your chain of generations, some of the same ancestors will start to appear multiple times. So when you have repeat ancestors, the inverted triangle starts to collapse in on itself and look more like a diamond. This scenario plays out in every person's pedigree at some point. But when there are elevated levels of DNA being shared between cousins, this indicates a stronger degree of pedigree collapse in more recent generations. So after running through all of that with John, he began to put together his family tree or his pedigree, but there's a slight problem. He doesn't know who his father is, which makes things a lot more difficult. So I began some proofs by contradiction, trying out different scenarios, substituting different people for John's father in his pedigree. I introduced the possibility that maybe John's father was a first cousin to his mother. I did the same thing for a half-sibling and a couple other relationships. But honestly, because of genetic randomization, these numbers are all approximations and are just us speculating. So I let John know that the only way to get to the bottom of this is to go ahead and confront his mother and get more information about his father. Did they grow up in the same area? Did they have the same last name? Anything at this point could help. So he talked to his mom and explained everything that him and I spoke about, but the only thing he was able to get out of that conversation with her was that his father and her were only together for that one night where they conceived John. So I then tried something that I didn't try before. I tried working backwards from Arya and Sansa, doubling up the amount of centimorgans they shared with him for each generation. So if Arya and Sansa share 980 centimorgans with John, then John's uncle most likely shares 2,000 or more centimorgans with John as well. Since John's mom and John's half-uncle have the same father, which is John's grandfather, if we double up again, this would imply that John shares about 4,000 centimorgans with John's grandfather, or possibly even more. Hear me out for a second. I'll try to simplify this as much as possible, but just try to understand that everything that I'm about to explain right now is actually much more complex than how I'm gonna put it. So let's say Jon's grandfather's name is Aries. We are going to represent Aries' genetic makeup by the letters A, B, C, D, where any two letters represent 50% of his centimorgans. Jon's grandmother's name is Rayla, and we're gonna represent her makeup by letters E, F, G, H. Now, Aries and Rayla have a daughter, Jon's mom, of course, and she'll receive a random 50% combination from each of her parents. We'll say that she has A, B, E, F. AB from Aries and EF from Rayla. So if we now substitute Aries into Jon's father's slot, there are quite a few possibilities of what Jon's makeup would be, but let's skip to one of the most relevant ones where Jon inherits AF from his mother and BC from his father. Well, now Jon's makeup is AFBC, which implies that he shares more than 50%, but less than 75% of his DNA with his father/grandfather.
Do you concur?
Concur with what, sir?
So if we just throw out a number in that range, like 4,600 centimorgans being shared between Jon and his grandfather, this sets up a scenario that could work, because Jon's half-uncle would still only inherit about 3,500 centimorgans from Aries, and this new scenario would imply that Jon and Ned are actually half-brothers. So the 2,000 plus centimorgans that are shared between Jon and Ned is now plausible, and supports the 980 centimorgans being shared between Jon and his cousins, Arya and Sansa. So I explained this to Jon, and he also let me know that he has never met his grandfather, which pretty much convinces me that this scenario is most likely the most accurate one. So I encourage him to speak to his mother one more time about his grandfather. And the mystery was finally concluded. It seems there was one night where Jon's grandfather, who had a drinking problem and some mental issues, engaged in some acts with his mother, resulting in Jon's birth. His family kept the secret from him, but Jon took the news pretty well, and is somewhat relieved that he doesn't have to wonder anymore.
You always knew who I was. What I am.
So that was the craziest story I've told so far on this channel, and I am waiting on approval from my own family members so that I can tell my story as well. So stay tuned for all of that. Até logo.